Hello and welcome to 𝗂𝗏𝘁 Spotlight. I'm your host, Susan Choi. I recently got a chance to chat with Eric Kim, staff writer and essayist for the New York Times. His columns on recipes and food have made a great impact on home cooks and chefs alike, and he has recently come out with a new cookbook, Korean American. We had a great conversation on topics like global flavors and the evolution of the American home cook. Let's check it out. So Eric, please share with us, first of all, who you are, what you do, and tell us about your new book.
This book, Korean American, I wrote over the course of a year during the pandemic, and it came out 2 years ago and kind of changed my life, changed my career. I got the New York Times job around the same time. And now I write about food and recipes for the New York Times, and I'm constantly thinking about how people cook and eat out in the world, especially in the United States. I would call myself an Americanist. And yeah, I'm actually working on a recipe right now as we speak. Trying to figure out how to make zucchini exciting this summer.
What has the reaction been to your cookbook so far, especially from the context of, this intentionality of fusion, drawing upon, your roots living in the South, in America, drawing upon your Korean heritage? What has the reaction been like?
Mostly positive. It happens to be that this cookbook is my debut, so it's sort of the reaction to it coincided with the beginning of my food writing career, I would say, or at least the beginning of my public food writing career. And I feel that it was a big learning curve because there are some naysayers. That's kind of the fire behind this particular book. Every time I wrote about Korean food, I found a lot of authenticity gatekeepers, and it's not something that I like to dwell on anymore because it's something that I've moved on from, but also I think culture in general has moved on from. And what I mean by that is this notion that a Korean cuisine or something that you personally grew up with needs to necessarily fit some image or platonic ideal or arbitrary distinction in order to be considered that part of that culture. I like to use the example of the lemon pepper bulgogi in Korean American. When I first started developing a bulgogi recipe, because I was like, bulgogi is so famous that I need to have a bulgogi recipe in the book. I was making these pretty delicious, pretty okay soy sauce-based marinated bulgogi recipes, and it was summertime. I was grilling a lot at home, and my family was delighted to have bulgogi from me. But the more I did it, the more I just kept trying to chase this thing that I wasn't hitting, because they all tasted so boring to me. I was like, why am I providing a classic bulgogi recipe? So I was on the side, sort of for fun, developing this lemon pepper bulgogi. I was making my own lemon pepper rub. I was in Atlanta, back home for the first time since I was a kid. As like a 28-year-old, I was back in my mom's house as an adult, and kind of not just readdressing my childhood as a child of Korean immigrants, but also as a Southern boy. And lemon pepper was just such a big part of my growing up. And my mom is the one who was like, that lemon pepper bulgogi is more delicious. Or she was like, that's the one that you should put in the book. So I took it pretty far, and there were a lot of people who, both Koreans and non-Koreans alike, I can't tell you how many people have told me that they used to live in Korea or they served in the war, or there's a lot of people who have this personal relationship to Korea. And so if the recipes didn't match their expectation, they kind of like poo-pooed on the book. But with that said, a majority of the people, the hundreds of people who like came out to book talks, I was amazed. These are the people who are like holding your hand and crying and telling you like, thank you so much for writing a book like this. I felt so seen. And those are the moments that I started to realize I needed to pay attention to, and not the authenticity gatekeepers. It's been a long journey, to say the least.
You do definitely have an audience. You have a large audience, Eric. You have a sphere of influence. I would love to hear from your point of view, your take, your insights on, what the drivers are for this growing desire for global flavors. We at the Food Institute, we've been doing, our reporting, and that is just the #1 trend across the board, whether in CPG or in food service. People want, different food experiences now. They want to taste, they claim they want authentic, ethnic, experiences, new types of flavors. What do you think are the drivers for that?
Ooh, this is a great question. It's evolved so much for me over time, but I would say that I think one really important aspect that I realized later as I develop recipes, maybe a little more intentionally for my job, my daily job, is that people are ready. They're ready to add a new ingredient to their pantry if you can convince them it's delicious and worthy enough. But also, it's really easy to do so because most ingredients in the world are beloved by a certain group of people, a certain culture. It might not be an American culture, but all it takes is education. If you educate people, and especially if you tell people who are open and excited to learn, it's amazing what they'll go out and buy. It's amazing what they will seek out, even if they have to go to the separate Japanese grocery store, Korean grocery store. But of course, there's like online shopping now, and I just realized that food media for so long has been led by mostly white people and gatekept by white people. And because of that, the food that's on magazines, that's in every Whole Foods, that's in every market, has for a long time looked the way it has, because those people in those rooms are saying things like, oh, that's a specialty ingredient. You can't get it at Kroger or Whole Foods or whatever. But I realized that in media, if you put it on the magazine, if you put it on the front page of a newspaper, a national newspaper, those grocery stores will start carrying those ingredients because people are going to the grocery stores and be like, do you have this? And sorry, this is a whole thing that it's sort of my galaxy brain of like, as a recipe developer, I just realized it's so much more than, what's on the page. The influence is crazy and so beyond me. And I know some grocery stores actually keep up with they keep up with my columns because they are trying to make sure that their store is stocked that week with that ingredient. I'm sure Alison Roman drives that kind of thing a lot. Samin Nosrat sold out buttermilk. The grocery stores are how people buy their food. So, but the thing that influences it is media.
So Eric, related to that point, I mean, how would you say the profile of the at-home cook in America has evolved in the past 10, 20 years?
I think from my perspective, I've kind of been a home cook customer of food media since I was a kid. I started baking and cooking since I was 13 years old, and very much influenced by the Food Network, which did a lot to change food culture and get people to really cook at home. I think what's really changed is people are just way more educated now, and they have access to more ingredients. Immigrant communities have flourished. The children of those immigrants are now grown-ups, and they're all chefs. And so I like this idea that all we were waiting for was the children of those immigrants to grow up and do their thing. And that's why it's so exciting now to go out to eat food, because there's so many different types of people cooking, and it's not just one voice, one French trained whatever anymore, because that food can be really boring sometimes.
Given what you know about, what's being sold out there today, from products, ingredients, what do you think is the most important thing that businesses should try to keep in mind when launching new products, developing, new products, trying to think of new concepts, new ideas? What do you think it is that, today's at-home cook or, even just food enthusiast needs or wants right now?
I can speak from the recipe perspective. I'm definitely not a product producer, but as a consumer and also as a recipe developer who sees what people click, I think, man, what really resonates with people is simplicity. But I've always described it as simplicity with either with a twist or simplicity with one aha moment, a learning opportunity. I guess what I mean is when people stop me on the street, they're not saying, oh, I love that 7-hour kimchi tteokmandu that you developed for the New York Times, that won New Year's. People stop me on the street because they're like, thank you for the tuna mayo rice. That feeds my family. Thank you for the 𝗟𝗏𝘁. It's a lot of like rice bowls because that's how I eat. And I think that's what I learned is that I've been actually trying to go back to that state where, I think as a developer, I need to always write recipes that come from my real life. And so I try to live a life. I try to, it sounds cheesy, but I try to stop work. I try to cook dinner for my partner and me. Sometimes he cooks and inspires a recipe. I try to give him credit when I can. But it's the only way to create something that actually hits, something that actually goes viral, is for it to truly be useful. And our gochujang butter noodles, Genevieve Ko and I worked on that for many months, and we edited it for even longer. What people really want help with is feeding themselves, and it's but they also want to be delighted. So I try my best to do stuff like that and in the kitchen, and because that's how I eat. I just really think people want simplicity, and they just want cool ideas to be fed. And I wish more people understood that relationship between recipes and what they're meant to provide, which I think is service and ideas and inspiration.
Very well said. I like it. All right, Eric Kim, columnist for the New York Times. Eric, thanks again for joining me. This was great.
Thanks for having me.
Our thanks to Eric Kim, staff writer and essayist for the New York Times. And as always, you can check out more of our great content by clicking on this playlist. Till next time, I'm Susan Choi. Take care.